Hey, Agent Your Thoughts here, coming at you with another video. We're going to do some more building, and it's going to be a free build again. So I'm going to do about 10 of these, and I've got, my goal is like 65 baskets. So that's what I've got to do today is 65 baskets. Now, you probably will have already seen the video where I just put in the new watering system, at least connected everything together and did that. So that's going to make things easier, and I can spend less time doing the watering today and just run through that. Yeah, so we're going to do about 10 of this mix, and we'll talk about a few things when we do that. One of them involves potting soil, and how potting soil is going to be tied up in politics. So if you were a plant lover, this is something you might want to stock up on. So let's get over to the table, we'll start the build, and then we'll have our talk about potting mix. All right, well, I hope I'm in focus for you. So we've got a mix. We're going to use Mr. Ross's Purple. We're going to use Pitaya. We're going to use Indian Summer Calibrachoa, Blue Fan Scaevola, and Sunbeam Biddens. So that's our mix that we're going to be doing, and we're going to do 10 of those. So I've got all of my pots ready to go. I've got my plants all pulled. Let's go ahead and start on that. The whole debate is really what you put in the center on these, and the easiest thing is to pick something that's upright and put that in the very center of your pot. So it should be kind of obvious what we're going to put that's upright, which is going to be this Calibrachoa right here. Again, these should have had another pinch on them, but that didn't happen, so we're going to go ahead and give it a pinch now. Well, that one's branching. Now, I want it to branch lower. We'll take it that one there. Okay, so this one's going to go in the center, and then we're going to start a rotation all the way around, and we're going to put our like plants across from one another, just how we always do. Okay, so that one is there, and that is Chameleon Indian Summer, a Calibrachoa. I'm just going to pronounce it Biddens, so nobody gets upset. There you go. That is Sunbeam. It is a nice bright yellow flower with a little thread leaf on it. If you see me sweating, it's because we had some awesome work done either late last night or early this morning. I don't know which, but our propane heater had to have some replacement parts and they didn't come in. And we had our building maintenance and a community member that helped us out by providing an electric heater. So there's actually an electric furnace behind me, which is belching out nice warm air. I turned the upper fan off because it's really, really loud, but it is helping keep this building above freezing. The hills up above us did have snow last night. I wasn't here early enough this morning to see what the cold temperature was, but yesterday it was 40 in here and it was 30 degrees outside. So that's going to save our bacon until the main heater gets up and running, which should be Monday. But if you see me kind of sweating, it's because I'm in the way of the heater vent and catching a little bit of that heat. But I'm very thankful, very, very thankful. Thank you to the folks that made that happen. All right, so let's keep going on with the build. So we've got Scaevola, we've got our Biddens, we've got our Calibrachoa, and then we're going to put in Mr. Ross's Purple. So this is my verbena that I found out of a package of seed that I really, really liked, and I did a little work with it. And it is a nice purple. So I'm going to put that in here. Yeah, it's not patented. So I did a little cultivating work with that. And then we are incorporating that in our baskets this year because I've really enjoyed how it turned out. It should be about as spreading as the Pitaya is, which was definitely a crowd favorite last year. All right, so we'll get this one in, and then once this mix is done and we put a hanger on this, we'll talk about what is going on with potting soil. Okay, so there we go. There is the Pitaya. We've got this all balanced out. Get that potting soil in there. All the cracks and crevices. By now you guys know how this goes. I'd love to have a bigger mix of plant material, but we are but a small operation, a small school. We can't go too crazy. Even though some people think this year is kind of crazy, it will be good. It will be good. All right. Stick that hanger in there. So as soon as this mix is done, the rest of them I'll just keep building, and we'll talk a little bit about what in the world is going on with potting soil. And the hanger's on. There we go. Tags are in. That one is done. We'll move it off to the side, and then potting soil. All right, there we go. Got my mix of plants. So what in the world is going on with potting soil? Why in the world would I say that we needed to talk about potting soil? Well, the potting soil that I use is Sunshine Mix number 4. And in that mix, I actually use peat moss. So peat moss is the preserved remains of sphagnum moss from basically swamps. So this is peat moss. Y'all should know what peat moss is. If you like plants, you know what peat moss is. But sphagnum moss, when it dies in a swamp, the acidity helps preserve it, and we have massive swamps and massive areas that were wetlands that had a lot of peat moss in them, and it's a natural resource. Now, most good solid quality growing mixes do actually use peat moss as part of their base, and all of the potting mixes that I use have that peat moss as one of the bases. Peat moss is an excellent material for absorbing and retaining moisture. So it keeps our plants from drying out, and in addition to that, it is a fairly light and airy material, so it allows for good oxygen exchange down around the roots. It's just a great material. It's not as coarse as bark dust, which is a common ingredient, and it's not as hazardous to your plants as using garden mulch. So a lot of your planting mixes that you buy, it says, Black Gold or, Miracle Grow, a lot of those utilize a mulch, and mulch is nothing more than community yard waste. So when you put that compost bin or that the yard waste bin out in front of your house, that material is collected and they compost it, and one of the things they turn that compost into when they're done is potting media. And for most applications that's okay, but we don't want that for our application. We want a ingredient that is consistent, that doesn't have any weed killers, it doesn't have a high bacterial or fungal load. We want a sterile potting media when we're working in a greenhouse and nursery operation. That's so that we can ensure a consistent product, and we cut down on the amount of problems. If you as a homeowner lose a few plants because of bad potting media, that's okay. You just go get a new one. If a nursery loses plants, they could be losing thousands of plants at a time. Or they could have to treat them with fungicides or other chemicals to keep those plants alive, and that can be expensive. And also, nobody wants plants that are all loaded with chemicals. So because of that, I stick with potting media that has peat moss in it. Now, it is considered a mineral resource, and we don't have a lot of peat moss in the United States, unfortunately. The majority of our peat moss actually comes from north of the border. Wait. Yeah, north of the border, that way. It comes from Canada. And right now it is March 15th, 2025. And as most of you that have paid attention to the news know, there is a trade war brewing between the United States and Canada. Words have been exchanged, people have been offended, and countries are lashing out against one another in the trade war. Well, one of the products that is going to most likely have a 25% tariff on it is going to be peat moss. And there are not a lot of good peat moss alternatives out there. It's really one of those things that's difficult to replace. Now they have done some with shredded newspaper and other types of agricultural waste, but a lot of those really have a tough time competing with peat moss as far as quality and consistency. So for our greenhouse, we use a lot of potting media, a lot. And a 25% increase in my cost of potting media is going to be passed on to my consumers. So this is probably going to be the last year that our hanging baskets are going to be the cost that they are. The cost, unfortunately, is going to have to go up to reflect the change in the cost of our materials. And that's kind of across the board with anything right now, which is making life really difficult for all sorts of different industries. But the nursery industry is going to be the next one hit. And that's unfortunate. You know, I know a lot of people may have had no idea that the trade war was going to affect their flower garden. But unfortunately, I'm here to tell you that's going to happen. So hold on to your horses, or hold on to your pots. It's going to be a bumpy ride. So yeah, our trade war with Canada is going to make potting media more expensive. Now, the Nursery Association, one of the nursery associations, I can't remember which one, but one of the nursery associations has petitioned to have peat moss exempted from tariffs because of the wide-ranging impact that it is going to have on the greenhouse and nursery industry. And let me tell you, greenhouses, they don't make a lot of money. They run on pretty thin margins because there is generally a pretty high cost for producing your plant material, especially in northern latitudes. You know, northern latitudes, we've got to pay a lot more for our heat. And, you know, there's also not as large of a population up here. So our customer base is lower. So if we start incurring more costs, it's going to be harder and harder for nurseries to survive, which means you're going to be bringing stuff in from other places. So, you know, California doesn't have energy costs like we do. Their growing season, stuff down there, they don't need a lot of excess heat to get stuff to grow. Whereas up here, we don't heat, we don't have a crop, we don't have a product. So yeah, we've got to keep those margins low, and losing something like peat moss or having that increase in a tariff by 25% is going to be pretty significant. You know, it's going to be just like eggs are right now. People are going to wonder why everything's more expensive. You know, it's already pretty expensive where we're at right now with stuff having to be shipped in. The cost for some of the things that I've purchased here for my home is much, much different than the cost of where I would have purchased stuff when I was back where our family farm is located. So over there, I don't have the same expenses as I do here. You know, nursery crops, there's a lot of them there. There's a lot of greenhouses, a lot of nursery operations. There's a lot of competition, which means that costs stay low. Here, there's not a lot of competition, and everything has to, or a good portion of the stuff has to be shipped in, which makes costs higher. So, not super excited about peat moss getting more expensive. I'll put a few more of these out here. We're going to go with that because this is the last pinch for these. Okay, and we'll just do a pinch on this. Get him to break. Do the same with the other little trailer here. That should go just fine. Okay, bring that container in. So anyway, here's a word that's a word of warning for you if you enjoy planting and you use a lot of potting soil. This would definitely be one of those times where you might want to go stock up before prices climb higher than what you can afford, unfortunately. You know, several years ago, I was at a trade show, a nursery trade show, and the discussion that had started amongst nurserymen during that trade show or the times around it was a lot about what are we going to do with the future of peat moss. You know, what is the nursery industry going to do as a substitute? Because even back then, we were discussing, you know, what happens if your supply is cut off? You know, have we ever seen the supply of peat moss cut off? Yes. Yes, we have. It was not that long ago. Probably during an era that you've tried to block out of your mind and memory. Remember 2020? During 2020, nothing was being shipped over the Canadian border. Couldn't send trucks up. They weren't sending trucks here. A lot of peat moss went out of stock. And 2020 was also a year that a lot of consumers really discovered plants because they were all stuck at home and everybody worked on their gardens. So 2020 is really kind of the climb for peat moss. But you know, before that, when I was at that trade show, there was a lot of people trying to show off their solutions for peat moss alternatives. One of the ones that was kind of the star of the show, and they did a lot of work on it, was a peat moss replacement that was based on a product that has also suffered. I think it's actually kind of funny. So the company was working with newspaper plants, so the mills that made newsprint, and they were getting recycled newsprint and byproducts of the newspaper recycling industry, and they were turning that into a peat moss-like product. Well, the only problem with that is, I don't know if you're aware, but the newspaper industry is also going extinct. So now we've got to find other solutions other than newspaper and paper waste, because that doesn't work right now either. All right, we're clicking along on this. Now, the one thing about the petunia that I was working on is it branches, but you've got to work with it to get it to branch. You know, one pinch isn't good enough for that. It needs multiple pinches. This one's just fine. That one's okay. Just pinch a little bit of this guy here. Need to branch a little more. All right. Anyway, probably never thought about that. About having your peat moss interrupted by an international trade war, but it happens. So you know what? I should just put this out there, since I know that this channel is starting to get a decent reach. You know, and you can also help with that. If you haven't subscribed, please do. But if you are in the nursery or greenhouse industry and you know of an alternative to peat moss, and you have a product that you'd like tested or kind of, promoted, reach out to me. Go ahead and drop a comment or leave me a message, and we'll see what we can do to do some research. I've got plenty of students that would love to do some research on peat moss alternatives, anything that's kind of a science related around ag or horticulture. Be definitely something we would like to try. There we go. Basket. Scavola just doesn't like to branch. I think it's, if I remember right, I think it's native to Australia. I think. I'd have to go back and look, but I enjoy it. It's a unique flower. It's one I kind of geek out on because it's shaped like half a flower. It adds a lot of very unique structure and texture, and then an interesting blossom. So that's kind of one of those reasons I love to include it. There you go, there's another one. All right, there you go. Well, we have some folks coming in now, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video here. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something about peat moss. Ag Teacher Thoughts out.